I twisted my aching shoulder as I wiped down another mahogany table at Romano's, the scent of garlic and oregano mingling with the harsh chemical bite of disinfectant. Each circular motion sent a sharp pain down my spine, a reminder that my body wasn't built for 12-hour shifts on marble floors. The afternoon light streaming through the restaurant's massive windows caught the gold-veined surfaces of the imported Italian marble, creating patterns that danced across my white uniform as I moved between tables. My reflection in the polished surface looked tired. Dark circles shadowed my eyes, and my honey-blonde hair had escaped its neat ponytail hours ago. I unconsciously pressed my palm against my flat stomach, a protective gesture I'd developed over the past 2 months, though nothing showed yet. Nothing that anyone would notice anyway. The persistent ache in my lower back had been getting worse lately, but I couldn't afford to take breaks. Not when rent was due in 3 days and I was still $70 short. My morning sickness had been brutal for weeks, but I'd learned to swallow the nausea and keep moving. The alternative was losing this job, and losing this job meant losing everything. "Isabel, table 6 needs their wine refilled," called Maria, the head waitress who'd become something of a protector since I'd started working here 6 months ago. Her thick Brooklyn accent carried across the dining room as she balanced 3 plates on one arm with practiced ease. "And Vincent wants to see you about the private dining room." My stomach clenched, and not from morning sickness this time. Vincent Romano owned this place, and his family had connections that ran deep through New York's underbelly. Everyone knew it, but nobody talked about it. The restaurant served as a legitimate front, but the back rooms hosted meetings that had nothing to do with wine pairings and seasonal menus. I'd kept my head down since starting here, grateful for any work that paid cash, and didn't ask too many questions about my past. The other girls had warned me about the VIP section upstairs, told me to avoid it if possible. High-stakes business meetings, they said. Men who didn't like their faces remembered. The irony wasn't lost on me. Isabel Moore, former Columbia law student, daughter of a federal judge, reduced to serving osso buco to criminals who probably knew my father by reputation. But that life felt like it belonged to someone else now. Someone who hadn't made the catastrophic mistake that led me here. "Tell Vincent I'll be right there," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady as I finished wiping the table. The afternoon shift was winding down, and the restaurant would close for an hour before the dinner crowd arrived. This was usually when Vincent handled his more delicate business matters. I smoothed my uniform skirt and checked my reflection in the mirrored wall. Professional, invisible, safe. Those were the qualities that had kept me employed here, even as other girls came and went. I didn't ask questions, didn't linger near conversations, and didn't give any of the male customers reason to notice me beyond my ability to take their orders efficiently. Vincent's office was tucked behind the kitchen, past the walk-in freezer and the industrial dishwashers that never seemed to stop running. The smell of basil and roasted tomatoes gave way to cigarette smoke and expensive cologne as I approached his door. Through the frosted glass, I could see his massive silhouette hunched over his desk, probably going through the books that showed only half of the restaurant's real revenue. I knocked softly. "Mr. Romano? You wanted to see me? Come in, sweetheart." His voice was gravelly from years of chain smoking, but he'd always been kind to me. Protective, even. Like he sensed I was running from something but respected me enough not to ask what. His office was cramped but expensive. Real leather chairs, a Persian rug that probably cost more than I made in 6 months, and photographs covering every surface. Vincent with local politicians, Vincent at charity events, Vincent receiving awards from Italian-American business associations. The legitimate face of a complicated man. "Sit down," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "You look tired. You been eating enough?" The concern in his voice almost brought tears to my eyes. In the 6 months since I'd shown up here with nothing but a fake reference and desperation, Vincent had become something like a father figure. He never pried, but he noticed things, like when I worked through my lunch breaks to save money, or when I picked up extra shifts even though I was clearly exhausted. "I'm fine, Mr. Romano. Just been busy." He studied my face with sharp brown eyes that had seen too much of the world. "You know I got daughters, Isabel. 3 of them. All grown now. But I remember when they were struggling, trying to make it on their own." He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. "I know what a woman looks like when she's got troubles." My throat tightened. I'd gotten too comfortable here, let my guard down too much. Vincent's kindness had made me forget that this was temporary, that I couldn't stay hidden forever. "I need you to work the Merlot room tonight," he continued, naming the restaurant's most exclusive private dining space. "Important client, very particular about service. You're my best girl for handling difficult customers." The Merlot room. I'd never worked up there before, had actively avoided it. The private dining rooms were where Vincent conducted his real business, where conversations happened that could get people killed. But I couldn't refuse. Not without raising questions I couldn't answer. "Of course. What time?" 7:30. 1 table, 4 guests. They specifically requested discreet service, if you know what I mean. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a thick envelope. "This is for you. Consider it a bonus for taking care of tonight." I stared at the envelope, knowing it contained more money than I made in a month of regular shifts. Enough to cover rent and then some. Enough to buy me more time to figure out my next move. But money like this always came with strings attached. "Mr. Romano, I appreciate it, but I'm not sure I'm ready for that kind of responsibility." His expression softened. "Sweetheart, I've been watching you for months. You got class? You know how to handle yourself around powerful men. These clients, they appreciate that kind of professionalism." He pushed the envelope across the desk. "Besides, you need this. Don't think I haven't noticed you counting every penny." He was right. I did need it. The baby would be here in 7 months, and I had nothing saved. No family to turn to, no safety net. Just this job and the hope that I could stay invisible long enough to figure out a plan. I took the envelope, the weight of it both reassuring and terrifying. "Thank you, Mr. Romano. I won't let you down." "I know you won't. Now go home, get some rest. Tonight's going to be a long night." I walked home through the crowded streets of Little Italy, the envelope hidden deep in my purse. The early September air carried the smell of roasted coffee and fresh bread from the bakeries, sounds of children playing in the small parks between buildings. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that their neighborhood harbored secrets in its upscale restaurants and social clubs. My apartment was 8 blocks away, a 4th-floor walk-up in a building that had seen better decades. The stairs creaked ominously under my weight, and the hallway smelled perpetually of garlic and industrial cleaner. But it was mine, paid for with honest work, and that meant everything. I double-locked the door behind me and immediately kicked off my shoes, my feet throbbing from hours on the marble floors. The studio apartment wasn't much, just a bed, a tiny kitchenette, and a bathroom with a shower that only produced lukewarm water on good days. But the windows faced east, filling the space with morning light, and I'd made it as cozy as possible with secondhand furniture and plants I'd rescued from the trash. On my small dresser sat the only reminder of my old life, a photograph of my brother Thomas and me at his law school graduation. We were both smiling, arms around each other, believing that our futures were bright and secure. Before everything fell apart, before Thomas was arrested, before I discovered truths that shattered everything I thought I knew about justice and family loyalty. I touched the frame gently, as I did every morning and every night. Thomas was somewhere in Rikers Island right now, probably in solitary confinement for his own protection. The murder charges against him were fabricated, but the evidence was ironclad. Someone with serious power wanted him gone, and they'd done their job perfectly. That's when Ian Morello entered my life like a storm, offering a devil's bargain that I couldn't refuse. The memory of our last conversation still haunted me. Ian, sitting in his penthouse office with Manhattan spread out behind him like a personal kingdom, explaining exactly how he could make Thomas's charges disappear. All I had to do was marry him. A business arrangement, he'd called it. 1 year of playing the devoted wife, and Thomas would be free. I'd said yes, of course. What choice did I have? But then I'd discovered exactly what kind of man Ian really was, and I'd run. Changed my name, dyed my hair, disappeared into the anonymous masses of working-class New York. For 6 months, I'd convinced myself I was safe, that Ian Morello had forgotten about Isabel Moore and moved on to other business. Now, staring at myself in the cracked bathroom mirror as I prepared for tonight's shift, I wondered if my time was finally up. Vincent's VIP clients, the mysterious private dining room, the unusually generous bonus. It all felt too convenient, too perfectly timed. But I had no choice except to show up and hope my paranoia was just pregnancy hormones making me imagine threats that weren't there. I styled my hair into a sleek chignon, applied minimal makeup to hide my exhaustion, and put on my best black uniform. Professional, invisible, safe. At least, that's what I told myself as I walked back to Romano's, each step feeling like I was walking toward my own execution. The restaurant had transformed for the evening service. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers, candles flickered on every table, and the servers moved with practiced elegance between the closely spaced tables. I clocked in and found Maria in the kitchen, reviewing the evening's reservations with the head chef. "There you are," she said, relief evident in her voice. "Vincent's been asking for you. The VIP party is already here, and they're asking specifically for the waitress who'll be serving them tonight." My blood went cold. "They asked for me specifically?" "Well, they asked for our most discreet server. Vincent said that was you." Maria handed me a small tray with 4 wine glasses and a bottle of Barolo that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "They're in the Merlot room. Tables already set. They just need wine service and whatever else they request." I took the tray with hands that trembled slightly. "Any special instructions?" "Vincent said to be invisible unless they need something. These are serious people, Isabel. The kind who don't like to be disturbed or remembered." She lowered her voice. "Whatever you hear up there, you didn't hear it. Whatever you see, you didn't see it. Understand?" I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. With the wine tray balanced carefully in my hands, I made my way to the narrow staircase that led to the private dining rooms. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if my body was trying to warn me away from whatever waited above. The Merlot room was the crown jewel of Romano's private spaces. Rich burgundy walls, crystal chandeliers, and a single large table surrounded by leather chairs that cost more than most people's cars. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city lights, but heavy curtains could provide complete privacy when needed. Tonight, the curtains were drawn. I paused outside the door, listening to the low murmur of male voices. 4 men, as Vincent had said. Their conversation was too quiet to make out words, but something about the tone made my skin crawl. This was the sound of power, of men who were accustomed to having their wishes become reality, regardless of the cost to others. I knocked softly and waited for permission to enter. "Come." The voice that answered was cultured, confident, and terrifyingly familiar. I opened the door and stepped into the room, keeping my eyes downcast as I'd been trained. "Good evening, gentlemen. I'm here to serve your wine. Look at me." 2 words, spoken with quiet authority that made my entire body freeze. I knew that voice. Had heard it whisper promises and threats with equal sincerity. Had heard it offer me salvation at the cost of my soul. Slowly, against every instinct screaming at me to run, I raised my eyes. Ian Morello sat at the head of the table like a king holding court, his dark eyes fixed on my face with an intensity that made my knees weak. He was exactly as I remembered. Devastatingly handsome, impeccably dressed, radiating the kind of power that bent the world to his will. His black hair was styled perfectly, his suit was obviously custom-made, and his hands, resting casually on the white tablecloth, bore the subtle scars that reminded everyone who knew to look that Ian Morello wasn't just a businessman. "Hello, Isabel," he said, my real name falling from his lips like a caress and a threat combined. "It's been a long time." The wine bottle slipped from my nerveless fingers, shattering against the marble floor in an explosion of crystal and deep red liquid that spread like blood across the pristine white tiles. The crash echoed through the silent room, punctuating the moment when my carefully constructed new life crumbled completely. "Careful," Ian said, his voice carrying that same gentle menace I remembered too well. "That's a 1982 Barolo, worth more than most people make in a month." I stood frozen, red wine seeping into my black shoes, staring at the man who had haunted my dreams for 6 months. He looked exactly the same, perhaps even more devastating in the candlelight. His companions, 3 men in expensive suits with faces I didn't recognize but whose bearing screamed enforcement, watched our reunion with professional interest. "I'm sorry," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'll get someone to clean this up." "No need." Ian gestured minutely, and one of his men immediately pulled out his phone. "Joseph will handle it. Won't you, Joseph?" The man nodded curtly and stepped out of the room, presumably to find cleaning supplies, which left me alone with Ian and 2 other men whose eyes never left my face, cataloging every micro-expression, every tell that might reveal useful information. "Please sit down, Isabel." Ian indicated the chair to his right, the one that would put me directly beside him. "We have so much to catch up on." "I'm working," I said, trying to inject some steel into my voice. "I need to get back to my tables." His smile was razor sharp. "I'm afraid that's not possible. You see, I've bought out the entire restaurant for the evening. Every table, every server, every moment of your time until I say otherwise." He leaned back in his chair, completely at ease. Vincent was very accommodating once I explained the situation. The bottom dropped out of my world. Vincent knew, had known, probably for weeks or months, exactly who I was and who was looking for me. The kind fatherly figure who had offered me protection and stability had been feeding information to Ian Morello all along. "You look pale," Ian observed. "Perhaps you should sit down before you faint and hurt yourself. Or the baby." The words hit me like a physical blow. My hand flew instinctively to my stomach, confirming what I'd hoped he couldn't possibly know. But of course he knew. Ian made it his business to know everything about everyone who mattered to him, and apparently, I still mattered. "That's right," he continued, his dark eyes never leaving my face. "Did you really think you could hide something like that from me? I've had people watching you since the day you disappeared. I know about the morning sickness, the doctor's appointments you've been skipping because you can't afford them, the prenatal vitamins you buy with grocery coupons." Each revelation felt like another nail in my coffin. I sank into the chair beside him, my legs too weak to support me any longer. The scent of his cologne, something expensive and distinctly masculine, brought back memories I'd tried desperately to bury. Late nights in his penthouse, his hands on my skin, promises whispered in the dark that I'd been foolish enough to believe. "Why?" I asked, hating how broken my voice sounded. "Why now? I thought you'd given up." "Given up?" Ian's laugh was genuinely amused. "Sweetheart, I never give up on something I want, and I want you." His hand moved to cover mine on the table, his touch warm and gentle and terrifying. "You're carrying my child. Did you really think I'd let you raise my heir in poverty, serving drinks to strangers?" I tried to pull my hand away, but his grip tightened just enough to let me know escape wasn't an option. "It's not your child, isn't it?" He turned my hand over, tracing patterns on my palm with one finger. "Let's see. We were together for 3 months before you disappeared. You've been gone for 6 months, and you're approximately 2 months pregnant. The math is fairly straightforward." The casual way he dissected my life, reducing our relationship and my pregnancy to mere equations, made my blood boil. But anger was better than fear, so I held on to it like a lifeline. "Even if it is yours, that doesn't give you any rights. I never agreed to have your baby." "No," he agreed. "But you did agree to marry me. That contract is still valid, regardless of your current employment situation." He signaled to one of his men, who immediately produced a manila folder from his briefcase. Our engagement was a business arrangement, and I take my business very seriously. He opened the folder, revealing the contract I'd signed in a moment of desperation. Every clause designed to bind me to him completely, every paragraph written to ensure he got exactly what he wanted. My signature at the bottom, bold and naive, sealing my fate. "This contract stipulates 1 year of marriage in exchange for your brother's freedom," Ian continued, his voice taking on the formal tone he used during business meetings. "You violated the terms by disappearing, which technically voids the agreement. Your brother's case could be reopened at any time." The threat was clear. Thomas, who had been quietly transferred to a minimum security facility after our engagement, could be back in maximum security facing murder charges within days. Or worse, he could have an accident that would make his innocence irrelevant. "However," Ian said, closing the folder, "I'm prepared to overlook your breach of contract. In fact, I'm willing to renegotiate the terms in your favor." I stared at him, trying to process what he was offering. In the world Ian inhabited, forgiveness was never free. Every gesture of mercy came with a price that was usually higher than the original cost. "What kind of renegotiation?" His smile was predatory. 5 years instead of 1. A real marriage, not just a business arrangement. In exchange, your brother gets a full pardon and witness protection. New identity, new life, complete freedom. The offer was generous by Ian's standards, which meant it was probably a trap. But it was also the only way to guarantee Thomas's safety permanently. A year of marriage to Ian Morello would have been survivable. 5 years felt like a life sentence. "And if I refuse?" "Then you go back to serving wine for tips while pregnant with my child. Your brother goes back to facing murder charges, and I make sure every door in this city stays closed to you." His voice remained conversational, but the threat underneath was unmistakable. "I own judges, police captains, hospital administrators, landlords. I can make your life very comfortable or very difficult, depending on your level of cooperation." The room felt like it was closing in around me. The 2 silent men at the table watched me with professional interest, probably taking mental notes on my responses for some future psychological profile. The wine stain on the floor had stopped spreading, leaving a dark red pool that looked disturbingly like blood in the candlelight. I need time to think about it. Of course. Ian reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box, placing it on the table between us. But not too much time. The longer you wait, the more complicated things become for everyone involved. I stared at the box, knowing it contained an engagement ring that probably cost more than most people's houses. A symbol of ownership disguised as romance, a beautiful chain designed to bind me to him forever. "Open it," he said gently. With trembling fingers, I lifted the lid. Inside was the most beautiful ring I'd ever seen, a flawless diamond surrounded by smaller stones, set in platinum that caught the candlelight and threw it back in brilliant flashes. It was stunning, elegant, and everything a woman should want in an engagement ring. It was also a collar, just a very expensive one. 10 carats, Ian said, lifting the ring from its velvet nest. flawless, like you. He took my left hand, sliding the ring onto my finger with practiced ease. A perfect fit. I had it sized while you were sleeping, back when we were together. The ring felt heavy on my finger, the weight of it a constant reminder of the chains I was accepting. But it also felt warm, and for just a moment I allowed myself to remember what it had been like when Ian looked at me with something that might have been love instead of ownership. It's beautiful, I admitted, because denying the obvious would only make me look foolish. You always were too intelligent to lie convincingly, Ian observed. It's one of the things I admire about you. He lifted my hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to my knuckles just above the ring. You can't hide what you're thinking, Isabel. I can see exactly how much you want to say yes, and exactly how much you want to run. He was right, and that terrified me more than any threat he could make. Part of me, a part I'd tried to bury for 6 months, still responded to his touch. Still remembered the way he'd made me feel cherished and protected, at least when we were alone together. The baby, I said, grasping for any logical reason to resist. This isn't the kind of life I want for a child. Our child will have everything, Ian said firmly. The best schools, the best opportunities, protection from every threat this world can offer. They'll grow up knowing they're loved and valued, not wondering where their next meal is coming from. The indirect criticism of my current situation stung because it was accurate. I couldn't provide for this baby, not the way Ian could. I was already struggling to afford basic prenatal care, and things would only get worse as my pregnancy progressed. And when they're old enough to ask questions about their father's business, they'll be given honest answers appropriate to their age, Ian replied. I won't lie to our child the way your father lied to you. Another carefully aimed barb. My father, the respected federal judge, who had built his career on prosecuting organized crime while quietly accepting bribes and favors from the very people he was supposed to be fighting. The hypocrisy that had destroyed my faith in justice and led me straight into Ian's arms in the first place. One of Ian's men reappeared with cleaning supplies and began efficiently removing the wine stain from the floor. He worked in complete silence, invisible despite being 3 feet away from our conversation. The kind of trained discretion that money could buy. I've arranged a car to take you home, Ian said, checking his watch. My driver will wait outside your building tonight, just to ensure your safety. Tomorrow evening, there's a dinner party at my penthouse, several business associates and their wives. I'd like you to attend as my fiancé. The presumption in his tone made my anger flare again. I haven't said yes. You will, he said with complete confidence, because you're not cruel enough to condemn your brother to life in prison, and you're not foolish enough to raise my child in poverty when you could give them everything instead. He stood up, smoothing down his suit jacket with practiced ease. The other men immediately rose as well, clearly accustomed to following his lead in everything. The car will pick you up at 7 tomorrow evening. Wear something nice. I've had several dresses delivered to your apartment, just in case your current wardrobe is insufficient for the occasion. The casual insult about my clothes was typical Ian, reminding me of exactly how far I'd fallen while offering to lift me back up to his level. It was manipulation of the highest order, and the worst part was that it was working. What if I'm not there when the car arrives? Ian's smile was gentle and terrifying. Then I'll come get you myself. And trust me, sweetheart, you'd prefer to come willingly. He leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to my forehead, the gesture intimate and possessive. Sweet dreams, Isabel. Try not to stay awake all night thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. Focus instead on all the ways it could go right. He left with his entourage, moving with the confident stride of a man who had just successfully acquired something valuable. I sat alone at the elegant table, surrounded by the detritus of their dinner and the fading scent of expensive cologne, staring at the ring that marked me as his property. Vincent appeared in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. Everything all right, sweetheart? I looked at the man who had betrayed me while calling me daughter, who had fed information about my life to the most dangerous man in New York while pretending to protect me. "You knew," I said. It wasn't a question. I knew. He had the grace not to look ashamed. "Been knowing for months, but I also knew he wasn't going to hurt you. Mr. Morello, he's got a reputation for taking care of what's his." "I'm not his." Vincent's expression softened with something that might have been genuine affection. "Sweetheart, you've been his since the day you walked into my restaurant. Question is whether you're going to make this easy on yourself or hard." I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady beneath me. The ring caught the light and threw rainbows across the white tablecloth, beautiful and damning. "Is my job here finished?" "That's up to you," Vincent said. "But I suspect you got bigger things to worry about than serving wine to tourists." He was right. Tomorrow night would determine the course of the rest of my life, and possibly my child's life as well. As I walked out of Romano's for what I suspected was the last time, I tried to convince myself that I still had a choice. But deep down, I knew that Ian Morello always got what he wanted. And what he wanted was me. The Blacktown car idled outside my building at exactly 7 o'clock, its windows tinted dark enough to hide whoever waited inside. I stood at my 4th-floor window, watching it through the gap in my cheap curtains, trying to gather the courage to go downstairs. The dress Ian had sent hung on my bathroom door, midnight blue silk that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent, with subtle beading that caught the light when I moved. It fit perfectly, of course. He'd always had an eye for details. The other dresses hung in my tiny closet like accusations: cocktail attire, business suits, even a wedding dress in ivory silk that made my chest tight with panic when I looked at it. Each piece was exquisite, expensive, and sized exactly right. The message was clear. Ian knew my body better than I wanted to admit, and he was prepared for every possible outcome of tonight's conversation. My phone buzzed with a text message. "The car will wait as long as necessary, but my patience has limits. I am." I touched the engagement ring I hadn't been able to bring myself to remove, feeling its weight like a chain around my finger. For 6 months, I'd convinced myself that I could disappear completely, that Ian Morello would eventually lose interest and move on to other pursuits. I'd been naive. Men like Ian didn't lose interest. They simply changed tactics until they found one that worked. With shaking hands, I applied lipstick and checked my reflection one final time. The woman staring back at me looked like the old Isabel Moore, polished, elegant, expensive. It was a mask I'd worn throughout law school and my brief time in Ian's world, and it felt strange to put it on again after months of invisibility. The driver was a mountain of a man in an impeccable black suit who opened my door without speaking and closed it behind me with practiced efficiency. The interior of the car smelled like leather and Ian's cologne, and I found myself fighting memories of other rides through the city when his hands had been on my skin and his promises had seemed believable. "Miss Moore," the driver said through the intercom, his voice professionally neutral. "Mr. Morello asked me to inform you that you're free to change your mind at any point during the ride. I can take you anywhere in the city you'd like to go instead." Another test. Ian was giving me an out, but he was also gambling that I wouldn't take it. He knew me well enough to understand that once I'd made the decision to get in the car, I'd see it through to the end. Backing down now would feel like cowardice, and whatever else I wasn't a coward. "Thank you," I said to the driver. "But I'm going to the dinner party." "Very good, miss." The drive to Ian's penthouse took 20 minutes through Manhattan traffic. 20 minutes for me to convince myself that I was walking into a negotiation, not a surrender. I had leverage now that I hadn't possessed 6 months ago. The baby changed everything. Ian might want me, but he needed this child. That gave me power, even if I wasn't sure how to use it yet. The elevator ride to the 47th floor felt endless. I'd made this trip dozens of times when we were together. But tonight, It felt like ascending to my own execution. The doors opened directly into Ian's private foyer, a space that screamed wealth and taste with its marble floors and original Picasso sketches on the walls. "Miss Moore," Ian's butler greeted me with a slight bow. "Mr. Morello is waiting for you in the study. The other guests won't arrive for another hour." Of course. Ian wanted time alone with me before subjecting me to the performance of playing his happy fiancé in front of his business associates. Time to make sure I understood the rules of the game we'd be playing tonight. The study was exactly as I remembered. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, leather-bound books that Ian actually read, and a wet bar stocked with liquor that cost more per bottle than most people's monthly salaries. Ian stood with his back to me, silhouetted against the city lights, wearing a tuxedo that had obviously been tailored specifically for his broad shoulders and lean frame. "You look beautiful," he said, without turning around. "That dress was made for you." "Literally," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Since you had it designed in my exact measurements." He turned then, his dark eyes taking in every detail of my appearance with the intensity of a man cataloging something precious. "Sit down, Isabel. We need to talk before the others arrive." I perched on the edge of one of his leather chairs, every muscle in my body tense with the effort of appearing calm. Ian moved to the bar and poured himself 2 fingers of scotch. Macallan 25, I noted automatically, because he'd taught me to recognize expensive things during our time together. "Drink?" he offered. "I'm pregnant, remember?" His smile was genuine for the first time since yesterday night. How could I forget? It's the most important thing that's happened to either of us. He settled into the chair across from me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, far enough away that I couldn't accuse him of crowding me. "Have you been to a doctor?" The question caught me off guard. No, not yet." "Why not?" I felt heat creep up my neck. The honest answer was that I couldn't afford proper prenatal care, but admitting that would only reinforce his argument that I needed his financial support. "I've been busy," I said instead. "Too busy to take care of our child?" His tone was mild, but I caught the reproach underneath. "I've made an appointment for you with Dr. Sarah Chen. She's considered the best obstetrician in the city, and she's already been fully briefed on your situation." "My situation?" "That you're carrying the heir to a considerable fortune and need the kind of medical care that reflects that importance." Ian sipped his scotch, watching my face over the rim of his glass. "The appointment is tomorrow at 10. Dr. Chen will handle everything from routine checkups to delivery, and her discretion is absolute." The casual way he'd taken control of my medical care should have infuriated me. Instead, I felt a treacherous surge of relief. I'd been worried about the baby's health for weeks, but pride had kept me from admitting I needed help. "And if I refuse to go?" "Then you'll be making a choice that puts our child at risk to protect your pride," Ian said bluntly. "Is that really the kind of mother you want to be?" The verbal slap stung because it was accurate. I was letting my fear of being controlled by Ian override my concern for the baby's well-being, and that was exactly the kind of selfishness he was counting on me to recognize. "Fine," I said. "I'll go to the appointment." "Good." Ian set down his glass and leaned forward, his expression growing serious. "Now let's discuss the real reason you're here. You've had 24 hours to think about my offer. What's your answer?" I'd rehearsed this conversation a dozen times during the sleepless night, but sitting here in his study with his dark eyes fixed on my face, all my carefully planned arguments evaporated. "I want to renegotiate the terms," I said instead. His eyebrows rose slightly. "I'm listening." 5 years is too long. 2 years and Thomas gets full witness protection immediately, not after the marriage is complete. "Interesting." Ian reached into his jacket and pulled out a leather portfolio, flipping it open to reveal several typed pages. "I anticipated you might want to modify our agreement. Let me present a counteroffer. He handed me the documents and I scanned them quickly, my law school training kicking in automatically. The contract was thorough, covering everything from living arrangements to public appearances, to what would happen if either of us wanted to end the marriage early. 3 years, Ian said as I read. Thomas gets witness protection within 72 hours of our wedding. In exchange, you agree to live as my wife in every sense of the word. Separate bedrooms if you prefer, but we share a home, appear together at social functions, and present a united front to the outside world. And after 3 years, you're free to leave if you choose. Full divorce, generous settlement, shared custody of our child. His voice softened. But I'm hoping that by then, you'll want to stay. I stared at the contract, trying to find the trap hidden in the surprisingly reasonable terms. With Ian, there was always a trap. What about your business? I asked. You're asking me to become part of a world that could get me killed. My business is evolving, Ian said carefully. The old ways, the violence and territorial disputes, they're becoming obsolete. Smart money is moving into legitimate enterprises. Real estate, technology, international trade. I'm positioning myself to be a businessman first and everything else second. It sounded good, but I'd heard similar promises from my father about cleaning up his own corrupt practices. Men with power rarely gave it up voluntarily, no matter what they claimed about wanting to change. And if someone from your past decides to target your family? Ian's expression darkened. Then they'll discover exactly why I've survived in this business for 15 years. No one touches what's mine, Isabel. No one. The possessive intensity in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it awakened something I'd tried to bury. The memory of feeling absolutely safe in Ian's arms, protected from every threat the world could offer. It was a dangerous feeling, one that had nearly destroyed my independence once before. I need guarantees about the baby, I said, forcing myself to focus on practical matters. Medical decisions, education, religion. I won't have you making unilateral choices about our child's life. Agreed. We'll make those decisions together. Ian pulled out a pen and made a note on the contract. Anything else? I want to finish law school. His pen paused. That's unnecessary. You'll be well provided for. It's not about money. It's about having something that's mine, independent of you. I met his eyes steadily. I was 6 months away from graduating when everything fell apart. I want to complete my degree. Ian studied my face for a long moment, and I could practically see him calculating the risks and benefits of agreeing to my request. A lawyer wife could be useful for his evolving business interests, but it also meant I'd have professional options that didn't depend on his largesse. Fine, he said finally. But you'll study from home with private tutors if necessary. I won't have you sitting in lecture halls where anyone could approach you. Paranoid much? Careful, Ian corrected. There's a difference. He made another note on the contract. Is there anything else, or can we finalize this agreement? I stared at the papers in my hands, knowing that my signature would change everything. 3 years of my life, bound to a man who could be gentle and generous one moment, ruthless and controlling the next. But also 3 years of financial security for my child, safety for my brother, and the chance to finish the education that had been stolen from me. One more thing, I said. I want weekly phone calls with Thomas, supervised if necessary, but I need to know he's safe and well. Done. Ian capped his pen and sat back in his chair. Sign the contract, Isabel. Let's make this official. My hand trembled as I took the pen from him. The weight of it felt enormous, like I was signing away my soul instead of just agreeing to a temporary marriage. But what choice did I have? Ian held every card that mattered: my brother's safety, my child's future, my own survival in a city where his influence reached everywhere. I signed my name with a flourish, the same bold signature I'd used on the original contract 6 months ago. This time, though, I wasn't signing out of desperation. I was making a calculated decision based on incomplete information and limited options, but it was still my choice. Ian took the contract and added his own signature with practiced efficiency. "Welcome back, Mrs. Morello-to-be." The sound of voices in the hallway announced the arrival of the dinner guests. Ian stood and straightened his bow tie, transforming from the intense negotiator back into the charming host I remembered from our previous life together. "Ready to meet your future husband's business associates?" he asked, offering me his arm. I stood and smoothed down my dress, checking my reflection in the mirror above his bar. The woman staring back looked composed and elegant, every inch the sophisticated fiancé of a successful businessman. No one would guess that I'd spent the last 6 months serving wine for tips, or that I'd just signed a contract that felt like selling my soul. "Ready," I said, taking his arm and allowing him to lead me toward the sounds of sophisticated conversation and clinking crystal. "Remember," Ian murmured as we approached the living room, "these people respect strength and despise weakness. They'll be watching to see if you're worthy of being my wife. Don't give them any reason to doubt it." The living room was filled with the kind of people I'd grown up around, wealthy, powerful, and completely comfortable with their place at the top of society's food chain. Men in expensive suits discussed business deals worth millions, while their wives, dripping in jewelry that could fund small countries, traded gossip about charity galas and art auctions. "Everyone," Ian called out, his voice carrying easily across the room, "I'd like you to meet my fiancée, Isabel Moore." The conversation stopped as every face turned toward us. I felt their assessment like a physical weight. These people who could make or break social careers with a word, who wielded influence like a weapon and loyalty like currency. "Isabel," Ian said, his hand warm and steady on my back. "Let me introduce you to my closest friends and business partners." And for the next 3 hours, I played the role I'd signed up for. The devoted fiancée, the charming hostess, the woman who belonged at Ian Morello's side. I made small talk about art and literature, laughed at their jokes, and deflected their subtle, probing questions with the skill of someone who'd grown up in similar circles. But underneath the performance, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made a deal with the devil. And the worst part was that I was already starting to enjoy it. The morning after the dinner party, I woke up in Ian's guest bedroom with sunlight streaming through windows that probably cost more than my yearly rent. Sometime during the evening, after the 3rd glass of champagne, and the 4th conversation about philanthropic endeavors that were obviously money-laundering schemes, Ian had quietly suggested I stay the night, rather than making the long drive back to my apartment. For the baby's sake, he'd said, though we both knew it was really about establishing possession. I'd agreed because I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally drained from hours of performing the role of devoted fiancé. But now, lying in Egyptian cotton sheets that felt like silk against my skin, I realized that this was just the beginning. Every compromise, every small surrender, would lead inevitably to larger ones until I'd forgotten what independence felt like. A soft knock on the door interrupted my brooding. "Come in," I called, expecting Ian's housekeeper with coffee and the kind of breakfast that rich people ate to start their days. Instead, Ian himself entered carrying a silver tray, with what looked like the entire contents of a gourmet bakery. He'd traded his tuxedo for jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my car, but the casual clothes only made him more attractive. Dangerous, that. It was easier to resist him when he looked like the intimidating businessman, instead of the man who'd once made me laugh until my sides hurt. "Good morning," he said, setting the tray on the bedside table. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck," I admitted, pulling the sheet up to my chin. The silk nightgown I was wearing, another gift that had been waiting in the guest room, was modest enough, but something about the way Ian's eyes lingered on the curve of my shoulder made me feel exposed. Morning sickness? among other things. I gestured at the elaborate breakfast spread. This is unnecessary. I usually just have toast. That's not sufficient nutrition for a pregnant woman, Ian said, settling into the chair beside the bed like he planned to stay a while. Dr. Chen will want to discuss your diet at this morning's appointment. Right. The doctor's appointment I'd agreed to. Another small step toward letting Ian control every aspect of my life. I can get there myself. Marcus will drive you. Ian poured orange juice from a crystal pitcher, the movement casual but somehow loaded with significance. He's been briefed on your security requirements. Security requirements? I sat up straighter, suddenly fully awake. What kind of security requirements? Ian's expression grew serious. The kind that come with being engaged to me. Last night wasn't just a dinner party, Isabel. It was an announcement. By tomorrow, everyone in my world will know that Ian Morello has a fiancé, and some of them will see that as either an opportunity or a threat. The orange juice turned to acid in my stomach. I'd been so focused on the immediate consequences of our arrangement that I hadn't considered the longer-term implications. In Ian's world, weakness was currency, and information was power. Our engagement would shift balances and create new vulnerabilities for enemies to exploit. What kind of threats are we talking about? Kidnapping, mostly. Possibly assassination if someone wants to send me a particularly strong message. Ian's voice was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather instead of potential attempts on my life. But Marcus is the best at what he does. You'll be safe. I pushed the breakfast tray away, my appetite completely gone. This is insane. I can't live like this. You can, and you will. Ian leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. Because the alternative is watching our child grow up without protection, wondering every day if today is the day someone decides to hurt them to get to me. The reminder of the baby hit its mark. I pressed my hand to my still flat stomach, trying to imagine the tiny life growing inside me. A life that would inherit Ian's enemies along with his fortune, whether I wanted it to or not. How long will this last? I asked. The security? Probably forever. Ian reached out and brushed a strand of hair from my face, his touch gentle despite the harsh reality of his words. The threats? They'll diminish as my business continues to evolve, but they'll never disappear completely. Power always comes with a price. I closed my eyes, trying to process the magnitude of what I'd agreed to. Not just 3 years of marriage, but a lifetime of looking over my shoulder, of wondering if every stranger posed a threat to my child. I want to see my apartment, I said suddenly. One last time before I move in here permanently. Ian's expression tightened. That's not a good idea. The longer you maintain connections to your old life, the more vulnerable you become. It's not negotiable. I met his eyes steadily. I need to say goodbye to that life properly, on my own terms. And I have things there that I want to keep. What kind of things? Personal items, photos, books. I didn't mention the pregnancy test I'd hidden in my jewelry box, or the letters I'd written to the baby during sleepless nights when the loneliness felt overwhelming. Some things were still mine, even if everything else belonged to him now. Ian studied my face for a long moment, probably calculating the risks of letting me return to my old neighborhood. 1 hour, he said finally. Marcus drives you there and back, and you don't go anywhere alone, not even to the bathroom. Fine. I swung my legs out of bed, suddenly eager to be moving, to be doing something other than lying in his guest room like a beautiful prisoner. I'll get dressed. Isabel. His voice stopped me at the bathroom door. Last night, at dinner, you were perfect. My associates were impressed. I turned to look at him, this man who'd just complimented my performance like I was an actress playing a role, which I supposed I was. Good, I said. Wouldn't want to embarrass you in front of your criminal friends. His smile was sharp. allegedly criminal friends. And yes, it would be unfortunate if my fiancé couldn't handle the social demands of her new position. The bathroom was larger than my entire apartment, with marble surfaces and fixtures that probably cost more than most people's cars. I stared at myself in the mirror, trying to reconcile the woman looking back at me with the person I'd been just 2 days ago. Same face, same hair, same eyes. But something fundamental had changed. Some core shift that I couldn't name but could feel in every cell of my body. I was becoming someone else. Someone who belonged in penthouses and private cars, who discussed charity galas with mob wives and smiled at jokes that weren't funny. Someone who accepted security details and prenatal appointments arranged by her future husband without consultation. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it felt almost like relief. By the time I emerged from the bathroom, Ian had left and been replaced by a woman I didn't recognize. She was tall, elegant, and obviously expensive, with silver hair styled in a perfect chignon and clothes that screamed personal shopper. "Miss Moore," she said, rising from the chair Ian had vacated. "I'm Victoria Sterling, your personal assistant. Mr. Morello asked me to help you prepare for the transition." "Transition?" "To your new life." Victoria gestured at several garment bags hanging on the wardrobe door. "I've selected appropriate clothing for today's activities, and I'll be accompanying you to your doctor's appointment to ensure everything goes smoothly." Another handler. Another person whose job was to manage me, to make sure I stayed in line and played my role properly. I wondered how many people Ian employed just to keep track of his assets. "I don't need a personal assistant," I said. Victoria's smile was professional and implacable. "Mr. Morello feels differently. Shall we select something for you to wear?" An hour later, I was sitting in the back of Marcus's armored sedan, wearing a designer outfit that cost more than I used to make in 6 months, being driven through the streets of Manhattan by a man who probably had enough weapons concealed on his person to outfit a small army. Victoria sat beside me, making notes on a tablet about things I would need to know for upcoming social obligations. "The Harriman Foundation Gala is next Friday," she was saying. "Black tie, 500 guests, mostly old money, with a few new money families invited to ensure adequate donations. You'll be seated at the head table with Mr. Morello." "What's the Harriman Foundation?" "Pediatric cancer research, officially. Unofficially, it's a networking opportunity for people who need favors from each other." Victoria didn't look up from her tablet. "Your role is to be charming but not memorable, supportive but not overeager. Think of yourself as an elegant accessory, but the casual reduction of my worth to that of jewelry should have insulted me. Instead, I found myself taking mental notes. If I was going to survive in Ian's world, I needed to understand its rules, even the ones that were insulting. My neighborhood looked shabbier than I remembered, the buildings more run down, the streets dirtier. Through the sedan's bulletproof windows, I watched people going about their daily lives, heading to work, walking dogs, pushing strollers, and felt like I was observing them from another planet. "Wait here," I told Victoria when Marcus pulled up outside my building. "I'm afraid that's not possible," she replied smoothly. "Mr. Morello was very specific about not leaving you unattended." "Then you can wait in the hallway, but I'm going into my apartment alone." Marcus caught my eyes in the rearview mirror. 15 minutes, Miss Moore, not a second longer. The climb to the 4th floor felt like ascending to my own past. Each step took me further away from silk sheets and personal assistants, closer to the woman I'd been before Ian Morello re-entered my life. My key still worked, the lock still stuck in exactly the same way, and my apartment still smelled like the lavender candles I bought from the dollar store. But everything looked smaller than I remembered. The furniture I'd been proud of rescuing from thrift stores looked shabby and worn. The plants I'd lovingly tended seemed wilted despite my neighbor's care. The photographs on my makeshift bookshelf, images of the life I'd built from nothing, looked pathetic next to the original Picassos hanging in Ian's penthouse. I packed quickly, stuffing clothes and personal items into the suitcase I'd brought with me. The pregnancy test went into my purse, along with the letters I'd written to the baby and the few pieces of jewelry that had belonged to my mother. Everything else, the furniture, the books, the carefully collected treasures from yard sales and flea markets, I left behind. At the last minute, I grabbed the photograph of Thomas and me from my dresser. Whatever happened next, I needed to remember why I'd made this choice. My brother's freedom was worth any price, even my own. "Ready?" Victoria asked when I emerged from the apartment. "Ready," I lied. The drive to Dr. Chen's office took us through Central Park, past joggers and dog walkers enjoying the kind of normal life I was leaving behind. I pressed my face to the window, trying to memorize the sight of ordinary people doing ordinary things. "Your first public appearance as Mr. Morello's fiancé will be tomorrow night," Victoria said, consulting her tablet. "A small dinner at Le Bernardin with several business associates and their wives. Nothing too challenging, just an opportunity for people to get used to seeing you together." "How many of these events will there be?" 2 or 3 per week initially. Mr. Morello wants to establish your presence in his social circle quickly, before his enemies have time to organize any kind of response. The clinical way she discussed potential threats to my life was almost as unsettling as the threats themselves. In Victoria's world, assassination attempts were just another social obligation to be managed efficiently. Dr. Chen's office was in one of Manhattan's most exclusive medical buildings, the kind of place where celebrities went for plastic surgery and billionaires received concierge healthcare. The waiting room looked more like a luxury hotel lobby, complete with fresh flowers and a pianist playing soft jazz in the corner. "Miss Moore," the receptionist said as soon as we walked in. "Dr. Chen is ready for you immediately. No waiting, no insurance forms, no questions about payment, just immediate perfect service for Ian Morello's fiancé. Another reminder that my old life was truly over." Dr. Chen was a small, elegant woman in her 50s who radiated competence and discretion. She examined me with gentle efficiency, asked detailed questions about my medical history, and ordered a comprehensive battery of tests that would have bankrupted me just 2 days ago. "Everything looks good," she said finally, helping me sit up on the examination table. "Baby is developing normally. Due date looks to be early May. I'd like to see you every 2 weeks initially, then weekly as we get closer to delivery." "Is there anything I should be worried about?" I asked. "Just the usual precautions. Proper nutrition, adequate rest, minimal stress." Dr. Chen glanced at my chart. "Mr. Morello mentioned that you've been under some pressure lately. I'd recommend prenatal yoga, perhaps some meditation. Stress can affect fetal development." Stress. As if my entire life being turned upside down was just a minor inconvenience that could be managed with deep breathing exercises. "I'll keep that in mind," I said. "I've also taken the liberty of scheduling you with our nutritionist and our maternal health counselor," Dr. Chen continued. "Given your unique circumstances, I think it's important to have a full support team in place." Unique circumstances. Another euphemism for being pregnant with a mob boss's baby. I wondered how many patients Dr. Chen treated who required bulletproof cars and armed escorts to their prenatal appointments. The ride back to Ian's penthouse passed in silence. Victoria made her notes. Marcus navigated traffic with professional skill, and I stared out the window at a city that felt simultaneously familiar and foreign. By the time we pulled into the underground garage of Ian's building, I felt completely disconnected from reality. "Mr. Morello is waiting for you in his office," Victoria informed me as we rode the elevator to the penthouse. "He's eager to hear how your appointment went." I found Ian behind his massive desk, talking on the phone in what sounded like Italian. He gestured for me to sit while he finished his conversation, his voice taking on the hard edge I remembered from our early encounters. Whatever he was discussing, it wasn't pleasant. "Sorry about that," he said, hanging up and giving me his full attention. "Business matter. How did everything go with Dr. Chen?" "Fine. Normal. Healthy." I handed him the folder of test results and ultrasound images. Due date is May 15th. Ian opened the folder and studied the ultrasound photo with an expression I couldn't read. His finger traced the tiny outline of our baby, barely visible against the grainy background. May 15th, he repeated softly. That gives us time to plan properly. Plan what? The wedding, obviously. I'm thinking sometime in January, small ceremony, just family and close friends. Ian looked up from the ultrasound. Unless you had other preferences? The casual way he discussed our wedding, as if it were just another business arrangement to be scheduled efficiently, made my chest tight. I hadn't really thought about it. Well, you'll have plenty of time to think about it now. Ian closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. Victoria tells me you did well today. No problems, no attempts to deviate from the plan. Should there have been? His smile was enigmatic. I would have been disappointed if you hadn't at least considered it. The fact that you chose to cooperate tells me you're finally taking this seriously. I'm taking my child's safety seriously, I corrected. Don't mistake compliance for acceptance. Fair enough. Ian stood and walked around the desk, stopping just close enough to invade my personal space without actually touching me. But eventually, Isabel, you're going to have to decide whether you want to spend the next 3 years fighting me, or whether you want to try building something real together. The suggestion that we could build something real hung in the air between us like a promise and a threat. Because despite everything, the manipulation, the control, the way he'd orchestrated my return to his life, part of me still remembered what it felt like to be loved by Ian Morello. And that was the most dangerous trap of all. 3 weeks into our renewed engagement, I was beginning to understand the scope of Ian's empire. It wasn't just restaurants and construction companies, luxury hotels and import businesses. It was a web of influence that stretched through every level of New York society, from city council members who owed him favors to federal judges who'd accepted his campaign contributions through carefully laundered PACs. I learned this while sitting in yet another business dinner, this one at a private club on the Upper East Side, where membership required either old money or new power. The women wore jewelry worth more than small countries' GDP, while their husbands discussed deals that would reshape entire neighborhoods. And Ian sat at the center of it all, the spider who felt every vibration in his carefully constructed web. The Hudson Yards project is moving forward, Marcus Whitfield was saying, cutting into his Wagyu beef with surgical precision. City planning approved our modifications, and we break ground next month. I recognized Marcus as one of Ian's legitimate business partners, a real estate developer whose portfolio included half of Manhattan's most exclusive buildings. His wife, Catherine, had been trying to engage me in conversation about charity work for the past hour, apparently unaware that my knowledge of high society fundraising came from law school case studies rather than personal experience. Isabel's been looking into ways to get involved with local community organizations, Ian said smoothly, his hand settling possessively on my lower back. Haven't you, sweetheart? The endearment rolled off his tongue like he'd been using it for years instead of weeks. To anyone watching, we looked like the perfect couple, wealthy, attractive, completely devoted to each other. The performance was so polished that sometimes I forgot it wasn't real. I'm particularly interested in programs that support working mothers, I replied, falling easily into the rhythm of our practiced conversations. Education and childcare assistance, job training programs, things that make a real difference in people's lives. Catherine's eyes lit up. Oh, that's wonderful. I sit on the board of the East Side Women's Initiative. We could definitely use someone with your passion. Isabel has a law degree from Columbia, Ian added, pride evident in his voice. She'll be finishing her studies in the spring. The way he presented my education, as if it were an accomplishment that reflected well on him rather than something I'd earned independently, should have annoyed me. Instead, I found myself pleased by the approval in his tone. Another small surrender in the ongoing erosion of my resistance. How impressive, Marcus said. Legal expertise would be invaluable for some of our upcoming ventures. I caught the meaningful look that passed between the two men and felt a familiar chill. In Ian's world, nothing was ever purely legitimate. Even charity work and community outreach programs served multiple purposes, creating public goodwill while providing cover for less legal activities. The conversation moved on to safer topics: art galleries, restaurant openings, the kind of cultural events that allowed wealthy people to see and be seen. I participated where appropriate, smiled at the right moments, and tried not to think about how easily I was adapting to this life of beautiful lies. After dinner, Ian excused us from the extended socializing and guided me toward the club's exit. His hand remained on my back, a gesture that looked romantic but felt possessive. Outside, Marcus waited with the car, engine running and rear door already open. "That went well," Ian said as we settled into the leather seats. Catherine was impressed. "Marcus thinks you'll be useful for the community outreach aspects of the Hudson Yards development." Useful. I stared out the window at the city lights blurring past. Is that what I am now? A useful accessory for your business dealings? You're much more than that. Ian's voice was soft, almost gentle. But utility is important in my world. The more valuable you are to my associates, the safer you'll be. The logic was sound, even if it reduced me to the level of a strategic asset. In Ian's universe, safety came through strength, and strength came through being too valuable to sacrifice. It was a harsh calculus, but I was learning to think in those terms. We drove through Manhattan in comfortable silence, the city's nighttime energy pulsing around us like a living thing. I'd grown up here, but I was seeing it through new eyes now, noting which buildings belonged to Ian's portfolio, which neighborhoods fell under his influence, which streets his enemies might use to stage an ambush. The paranoia was becoming second nature, another adaptation to my new reality. "I have something for you," Ian said as we turned onto Fifth Avenue. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box, different from the one that had contained my engagement ring. Inside was a delicate necklace, white gold with a single pendant that looked like abstract art, until I realized what I was seeing. A stylized I and M intertwined so elegantly that the design seemed natural rather than forced. "It's beautiful," I said, because it was. It was also a brand, a symbol of ownership disguised as romantic jewelry. "May I?" Ian took the necklace from the box, his fingers brushing my neck as he fastened the clasp. The pendant settled just above my heart, the metal warm against my skin. "There," he said, his voice low and intimate. "Perfect." I touched the pendant, feeling its weight like a reminder of all the ways Ian was claiming me piece by piece. The engagement ring, the clothes, the apartment that was becoming our shared space, and now this necklace that announced my status to anyone who knew how to read the signs. "Ian," I began, not sure what I wanted to say. "Shh." His finger pressed gently against my lips. "You don't have to say anything. I know this is hard for you, accepting how much your life has changed, but you're doing beautifully." The approval in his voice sent an unwanted warmth through my chest. I was beginning to crave his praise, to measure my days by his smiles and his casual touches. It was exactly the kind of psychological dependency he'd been cultivating since our first dinner at Romano's, and I was falling into it despite my best efforts to maintain emotional distance. The car pulled into the underground garage of Ian's building, and we rode the elevator to the penthouse in silence that felt charged with unspoken possibilities. Over the past 3 weeks, our relationship had settled into a careful dance of attraction and resistance, with Ian pushing boundaries just enough to keep me off balance while never crossing lines that would make me bolt. He was patient. I'd give him that. The master of long-term strategy. "Nightcap?" he offered as we entered the penthouse. "I should go to bed." Dr. Chen said rest is important. "Of course." Ian's smile was understanding. but I caught the flash of disappointment in his eyes. Sweet dreams, Isabel. I made it halfway to the guest bedroom before my conscience caught up with me. For 3 weeks, Ian had been nothing but considerate, giving me space when I needed it, including me in decisions that affected our future, treating me like a partner rather than a possession. The least I could do was acknowledge his efforts. Ian? I turned back to find him watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Thank you. For dinner tonight, for the necklace, for everything. His smile was genuine this time, reaching his eyes in a way that made my chest flutter. You're welcome. And Isabel, you were perfect tonight. Those people respect you now, which means they respect me more for having chosen you. I went to bed with his words echoing in my mind, the necklace still warm against my skin, and the uncomfortable realization that I was beginning to enjoy playing the role of Ian Morello's fiancé. The clothes, the jewelry, the deference from people who'd previously looked through me like I was invisible, it was seductive in ways I hadn't expected. More dangerous still was the way Ian looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Like I was something precious, that he was afraid might disappear if he held too tightly. It made me want to comfort him, to tell him that I wasn't going anywhere, that I was finally ready to stop fighting this connection between us. Which was exactly what he wanted me to feel, of course. Ian Morello didn't do anything without multiple layers of strategy, and seduction was just another tool in his considerable arsenal. But knowing that didn't make his attention any less intoxicating. The next morning brought an unwelcome reminder that my old life wasn't entirely buried. I was in the kitchen having breakfast when Victoria appeared with her usual tablet and efficient demeanor, but her expression was more serious than usual. We have a situation, she announced without preamble. Someone has been asking questions about your background. My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. What kind of questions? A private investigator, hired by an unknown client. He's been to your old apartment building, talked to your former neighbors, visited Romano's restaurant. Victoria consulted her tablet. Marcus intercepted him yesterday evening and had a conversation about the inadvisability of continuing his investigation. The euphemistic language didn't hide the threat. In Ian's world, conversations about inadvisability often involved broken bones and hospital stays. Who would be investigating me? That's what we're trying to determine. It could be law enforcement building a case against Mr. Morello, rival families looking for leverage, or someone from your past who's discovered your new circumstances. Victoria's expression remained professionally neutral. Mr. Morello wants to see you in his office immediately. I found Ian behind his desk, talking quietly on the phone while reviewing what looked like surveillance photographs. His expression was grim, the relaxed charm of last night's dinner completely gone. This was the other side of Ian Morello, the man who'd built an empire through strategic violence and wasn't shy about using it to protect what he valued. I don't care what it costs, he was saying into the phone. Find out who hired him and what they want, and make sure he understands that his investigation is concluded. He hung up and gestured for me to sit, his dark eyes scanning my face for any sign of deception. Tell me about your life before you came to work at Romano's. Everything. You already know everything. I know what you told me, and what my people were able to discover through conventional research. But someone thinks there's more to find, which means we missed something. Ian leaned forward, his intensity almost physical. I need to know what we're dealing with, Isabel. The safety of our child depends on it. The reminder of the baby growing inside me hit its mark. I pressed my hand to my stomach, feeling the slight roundness that was just beginning to show, despite the loose clothing I'd been wearing to hide it. There's nothing, I insisted. I left law school, changed my name, found work at Romano's. That's all. What about your father? Any possibility this is connected to his judicial career? Judge William Moore had made plenty of enemies during his time on the federal bench, but he'd been dead for 2 years. His corruption had died with him, along with any secrets that might threaten people still breathing. My father's cases are public record. If someone wanted information about his decisions, they wouldn't need to investigate me. Ian studied my face for a long moment, clearly weighing whether to believe me. Finally, he sat back in his chair, though his expression remained troubled. "We're going to increase your security detail," he said. "Marcus will have a partner now, and you won't go anywhere without both of them. No exceptions. For how long? Until we know who's asking questions and why." Ian's voice was final, brooking no argument. "This is not negotiable, Isabel. I won't take chances with your safety or our child's." The protective instinct in his voice sent an unwanted warmth through my chest. Whatever else Ian was, he genuinely cared about keeping me safe. It was possessive and controlling, but it was also oddly comforting to know that someone was willing to go to extremes to protect me. What if they want to hurt me to get to you? Then they'll discover that hurting you is the fastest way to end up dead, Ian said with quiet menace. "I've spent 15 years building my reputation on the principle that crossing me has consequences. Anyone who threatens what's mine learns that lesson very quickly." The casual reference to violence should have frightened me. Instead, I felt a treacherous sense of security. In Ian's world, being claimed meant being protected, and protection meant being valuable enough to fight for. "I want to call Thomas," I said suddenly. "If someone's investigating my background, they might approach him too." Ian's expression softened slightly. "I'll arrange it. But the call will be monitored, and you can't mention anything about the investigation or your current situation." Another reminder that even my relationship with my brother existed at Ian's discretion. But at least he was allowing contact, which was more than I'd had for the past 6 months. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of security briefings and modified schedules. My afternoon law tutoring session was moved to the penthouse. My weekly shopping trip was canceled, and Victoria began vetting every person I might come into contact with over the next several days. By evening, I felt like a prisoner in a very luxurious cage. "You're brooding," Ian observed, as we sat down to dinner in his private dining room. The table could have seated 12, but tonight it was set for 2, intimate despite its scale. "I'm thinking." "About?" I gestured at the opulent room around us, the fresh flowers that were replaced daily, the wine that cost more than most people's rent. About how easy it would be to get used to all this. The money, the protection, the way people treat me when they know I'm yours. Ian set down his fork, giving me his full attention. "And that bothers you?" "It should bother me more than it does." I met his eyes across the table. 6 months ago, I was fighting for every dollar, working 12-hour shifts just to afford basic necessities. Now I wear dresses that cost more than I used to make in a year, and I'm starting to think that's normal. What's wrong with accepting security and comfort? Because it makes me dependent on you for everything. My safety, my brother's freedom, my child's future. If I get too comfortable, I'll forget that this is temporary. Ian was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying my face with an intensity that made me feel exposed. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than usual. What if it didn't have to be temporary? The question hung in the air between us like a challenge. We both knew our contract specified 3 years, but we also both knew that contracts could be renegotiated if both parties were willing. "You're asking me to consider making this real," I said carefully. "I'm asking you to consider the possibility that it already is real, at least for me." Ian reached across the table and took my hand, his thumb tracing patterns on my palm. "I know how this started, Isabel. I know I manipulated the situation to get you back, but my feelings for you were never part of the manipulation." The sincerity in his voice made my chest tight. Part of me wanted to believe him, wanted to think that underneath all the strategic maneuvering was genuine emotion. But Ian was too skilled at getting what he wanted for me to trust my instincts completely. How would I know the difference? I asked. You're very good at making people believe what you want them to believe. His smile was rueful. Fair point. But I'm hoping that time will prove my sincerity in ways that words can't. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed with an urgent message. Ian glanced at it, and his expression immediately hardened. We need to go, he said, standing abruptly. Now. What's wrong? The investigator who was asking questions about you. He's dead. The words hit me like ice water. Someone had been killed because of me, because of whatever secrets they thought I was hiding. The beautiful dinner, the intimate conversation, the moment of connection between Ian and me. All of it evaporated in the face of this harsh reminder of the world we lived in. Did you? I couldn't finish the question. Kill him? No. Ian was already moving toward the door, his phone pressed to his ear. But whoever did wanted us to know about it immediately. This is a message, Isabel. Someone's declaring war. Within minutes, I was in the back of Marcus's armored sedan, flanked by bodyguards and racing through Manhattan traffic toward an unknown destination. Ian sat beside me, his jaw tight with anger, fielding phone calls in rapid succession as he tried to piece together what had happened. The body was found in his apartment, he reported after hanging up his latest call. Single gunshot to the head, professional execution. No signs of struggle, which means he knew his killer. Maybe it was just a robbery gone wrong, I suggested weakly. Ian's look was pitying. There's no such thing as coincidence in my world. Someone hired him to investigate you, then killed him to cover their tracks. The question is whether they got the information they wanted before he died. The car pulled up outside a nondescript office building in Midtown. Ian guided me inside, through security that was obviously expecting us, and up to a floor that housed what looked like a legitimate private security firm. But the level of technology in the conference room we entered suggested capabilities that went far beyond corporate protection. What do we know? Ian asked the moment we sat down. The man at the head of the table looked like an accountant, mild-mannered and forgettable. But his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to delivering life-and-death intelligence. Richard Holbrook, 38 years old, licensed private investigator with a clean record, he began, consulting a thick file. Hired 3 days ago by a client who paid cash and used a fake name. His assignment was to compile a complete background report on Isabel Moore, focusing on the 6 months before she started working at Romano's. Did he find anything? Ian's voice was deceptively calm. Hard to say. His computer was wiped clean, his files were removed, and his phone is missing. But we did find this. The man slid a photograph across the table. It showed me leaving my old apartment building, but I was wearing clothes I didn't recognize and carrying a suitcase I'd never owned. This isn't me, I said immediately. Ian studied the photo intently. But it looks like you. Same height, same build, same hair color. Someone's trying to create a false trail, I realized. Make it look like I was involved in something before I disappeared. The question is what and why. Ian pocketed the photograph. But we're not going to figure it out sitting here. We need to get you somewhere secure while we investigate. Where? My estate in the Hamptons. Full security. Completely isolated, and far enough from the city that we'll have advance warning if anyone tries to approach. The idea of being trapped in a house in the Hamptons, no matter how luxurious, made my claustrophobia flare. But the alternative, staying in Manhattan while someone orchestrated an elaborate frame job, was clearly worse. For how long? Until we know who's behind this and what they want. Ian stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Pack light. We leave tonight. An hour later, I was sitting in a helicopter flying over Long Island, watching the lights of the city disappear behind us. The estate that emerged from the darkness below looked like something from a movie, a sprawling mansion surrounded by manicured grounds, with outbuildings that probably housed enough security equipment to protect a small country. "Welcome to Blackwater," Ian said as we touched down on a private helipad. "Your home for the foreseeable future." The house was beautiful in the way that unlimited money could make things beautiful. Every surface polished, every detail perfect, every room designed to impress. But it was also isolated, surrounded by walls and guards and electronic surveillance that turned luxury into a very comfortable prison. "Your room is on the second floor," Ian said, guiding me through marble hallways lined with original artwork. "Ocean view, private bathroom, sitting area, everything you need to be comfortable." "What about you?" "Master suite is at the other end of the hall. Close enough for protection, far enough for privacy." He paused outside a door that probably led to a bedroom larger than my old apartment. "Unless you'd prefer other arrangements." The suggestion in his voice was clear, and for a moment I was tempted. The stress of the evening, the fear and uncertainty, made the idea of not sleeping alone appealing. But crossing that line would change everything between us, and I wasn't ready for those consequences. "Privacy is fine," I said. His smile was understanding but disappointed. "Of course. Sleep well, Isabel. Tomorrow we start figuring out who wants to destroy your life, and why." I lay awake most of the night, listening to the sound of waves against the shore, and trying to process everything that had happened. Someone was targeting me specifically, using sophisticated resources and professional killers to accomplish goals I couldn't begin to understand. But more unsettling was the realization that I felt safer in Ian's isolated mansion than I had anywhere else in months. The walls that made this place a prison also made it a sanctuary, and the man who controlled my life was also the only person capable of protecting it. I was falling into the trap Ian had set for me, surrendering my independence piece by piece in exchange for security and comfort. And the most dangerous part was that I was beginning to think it might be worth it. The call came at 3 a.m, shattering the uneasy peace I'd found at Blackwater. I'd been there for 2 weeks, long enough to establish routines that felt almost normal. Morning swims in Ian's Olympic-sized pool, afternoons studying for my law degree completion, evenings dining with a man who was becoming less like a captor and more like a partner with each passing day. The shrill ring of Ian's phone cut through the silence of the house like a blade. I could hear his voice through the walls, sharp and urgent, though I couldn't make out the words. Within minutes, there was a soft knock on my bedroom door. "Isabel?" Ian's voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear the tension underneath. "I need you to get dressed. We have to go back to the city immediately." I sat up, my heart racing. "What's wrong?" "There's been a development in our situation. I'll explain in the car." 20 minutes later, we were racing toward Manhattan in Ian's armored sedan, Marcus driving with the focused intensity of a man navigating a war zone. Ian sat beside me, his jaw tight with fury, fielding phone calls and clipped sentences that revealed nothing but suggested everything. "Tell me," I said after he hung up his latest call. Ian turned to face me, his dark eyes reflecting the lights of oncoming traffic. "Your brother escaped from the safe house." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean, escaped?" "Thomas was being held in a secure facility upstate while we dealt with the investigation. 3 hours ago, someone breached the perimeter, killed 2 guards, and took him." Ian's voice was clinical, but I could see the anger burning behind his controlled expression. It was a professional operation, military precision. My hand flew to my stomach, protective instincts overwhelming rational thought. Is he alive? We assume so. Dead hostages have no value. Ian reached over and took my hand. His touch meant to be comforting, but feeling more like a claim of ownership. "But this changes everything, Isabel. Whoever's behind this has your brother, and they're going to use him to force your cooperation." "Cooperation with what?" "We'll find out soon enough. People don't go to this much trouble without a specific endgame in mind." Ian's phone buzzed again, and he glanced at the message before showing me the screen. The text was simple. Tomorrow, midnight, Brooklyn Bridge. Come alone, or your brother dies. I stared at the words, trying to process their implications. Someone had orchestrated this entire situation, the investigation, the dead private detective, Thomas's kidnapping, to force a confrontation. But why? What could they possibly want from me that was worth this level of effort and violence? You're not going alone, Ian said, reading my thoughts. The message was clear. If I bring anyone else, then we'll make sure they don't see my people coming. Ian's voice carried the absolute certainty of a man accustomed to bending reality to his will. I won't lose you or our child to some elaborate game I don't understand yet. The drive back to Manhattan felt endless, each mile bringing us closer to a confrontation that could end with my brother's death or my own. I pressed my hand to the slight swell of my stomach, feeling the flutter of movement that had become noticeable in recent weeks. Our baby, growing inside me, innocent of the violent world they were being born into. There's something else, Ian said, as we entered the city limits. The security footage from your brother's facility shows his kidnappers' faces. We know who they are. He handed me a tablet displaying grainy surveillance images. 3 men in tactical gear, faces partially obscured, but still recognizable to someone who knew where to look. Eastern European, Ian continued, probably Russian, based on their equipment and methods. Professional soldiers, not street criminals. Russian? My blood went cold. Why would Russians want Thomas? Not Thomas specifically. You. Ian's expression was grim. This is about your father, Isabel. About cases he presided over during his time on the federal bench. The pieces began falling into place with sickening clarity. My father had built his reputation prosecuting organized crime, including several high-profile cases involving Russian mob operations. If some of those convictions had been overturned, or if new evidence had come to light. Judge William Moore sent a lot of people to prison, I said slowly. If they think I have information that could help their appeals, they're wrong. But that won't stop them from trying to extract it from you. Ian leaned back in his seat, his mind clearly racing through possibilities and contingencies. The question is, how they found out about our relationship, and why they waited until now to make their move. The car pulled into the underground garage of Ian's building, and we rode the elevator to his penthouse in silence, heavy with unspoken fears. The familiar luxury of his home felt surreal after the stark terror of the past few hours, like stepping from a war zone into a museum. I need to call my security team, Ian said as we entered his study. Map out the bridge approach, identify potential sniper positions. Plan contingencies for every possible scenario. Ian, I caught his arm as he reached for his phone. What if they're right? What if my father did leave information that could help their appeals? Then we'll deal with that after we get Thomas back safely. His expression softened as he looked at me, some of the calculating businessman giving way to the man who'd held me during thunderstorms and brought me coffee in bed. But right now, our priority is keeping you and our child alive. The next 18 hours passed in a blur of preparation and growing dread. Ian's study became a command center, filled with men who spoke in code and carried weapons that were definitely not legal. Plans were made and discarded. Backup plans were created for the backup plans. And through it all, I sat in the center of the storm, feeling increasingly disconnected from my own fate. You don't have to do this, Ian said for the 20th time as evening approached. I can have my people storm whatever location they're really planning to take you to, extract Thomas by force. And if they kill him before your people can reach him? I shook my head. I won't take that risk. Then you're willing to risk our child instead? The accusation stung because it was partially true. I was gambling with more than just my own life, and the weight of that responsibility was crushing. But Thomas was family, blood, the only person left who remembered me before I became Ian Morello's possession. "I have to try to save him," I said quietly. "If it were your brother, you'd do the same thing." Ian's expression darkened. "I would never put the people I love in danger for anyone, including family." The words hung in the air between us, loaded with implications neither of us was ready to address directly. Love. It was the first time either of us had used the word, and it fell into our conversation like a stone into still water, creating ripples that would change everything. "Ian, don't." He held up a hand, stopping me before I could respond. "Don't say anything about that right now. We'll have time to discuss feelings after we've dealt with the immediate threat to your life." As midnight approached, I found myself standing in Ian's bedroom, staring at my reflection in his full-length mirror. I was wearing all black, as instructed, with a wire sewn into my jacket that would allow Ian's people to track my location. The engagement ring caught the light, throwing brilliant flashes across the dark fabric. "It's not too late to change your mind," Ian said from the doorway. I turned to find him watching me with an expression that mixed love and fear in equal measure. He changed into tactical gear, preparing to follow me at a distance despite the kidnapper's demand that I come alone. "Yes, it is." I walked over to him, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "The moment I signed our contract, the moment I agreed to have your baby, it was too late for both of us." He cupped my face in his hands, his thumbs brushing across my cheekbones with devastating gentleness. "I never meant for it to be like this. The violence, the danger, the fear. I wanted to give you a life of luxury and security, not turn you into a target. I know." I covered his hands with mine, memorizing the feel of his skin against mine. "But this is the world you live in, and now it's the world our child will inherit. We have to deal with that reality." "Promise me something," Ian said, his voice rough with emotion. "If something goes wrong tonight, if my people can't reach you in time, promise me you'll do whatever it takes to survive. Lie, betray, sacrifice anyone you have to, but come back to me alive." The intensity in his voice made my chest tight. "I promise." He kissed me then, hard and desperate, pouring months of unspoken feelings into a single moment of connection. I kissed him back, tasting fear and love and the bitter knowledge that this might be goodbye. "I love you," I whispered against his lips, the words escaping before I could stop them. "I love you too," he replied, and I could hear the truth in his voice. "That's why I'm going to get you back, no matter what it takes." The ride to Brooklyn passed in silence. Marcus drove with his usual professional efficiency, but I could feel the tension radiating from him like heat. Everyone knew this was a trap, that I was walking into a carefully orchestrated ambush with minimal chance of survival. But sometimes the only way out of a trap was through it. The Brooklyn Bridge at midnight was exactly as lonely and dramatic as the kidnappers had intended. Fog rolled in from the harbor, muffling sound and limiting visibility to a few dozen yards in any direction. Perfect conditions for an ambush, terrible conditions for rescue. I walked alone across the pedestrian walkway, my footsteps echoing hollowly in the misty air. Every shadow could hide a sniper. Every support cable could conceal an enemy. And I had no way of knowing if Ian's people were close enough to help if things went wrong. The man who stepped out of the fog looked exactly like what he was, a professional killer dressed in expensive clothes. Tall, lean, with the kind of pale eyes that suggested too much experience with violence. "Miss Moore," he said in accented English, "thank you for coming." "Where's my brother?" "Safe for now. That depends entirely on your cooperation over the next few minutes." He gestured toward a black SUV parked at the Brooklyn end of the bridge. "We're going to take a short ride." The message said to meet here. It didn't say anything about going anywhere else. His smile was cold and professional. "Plans change," Your fiancé has made this more complicated than necessary with his security arrangements. We need privacy for our conversation." I could feel the wire in my jacket, knew that Ian's people were listening to every word, but I also knew that getting in that SUV would take me beyond their ability to provide immediate assistance. "What conversation? What do you want from me?" "Information about your father's files. Specifically, evidence that could overturn certain convictions he secured through illegal means." The man stepped closer, close enough that I could smell cigarettes and expensive cologne. "Judge Moore was a corrupt man, Miss Moore. He took bribes, suppressed evidence, and sent innocent people to prison to advance his career." "Even if that's true, he's been dead for 2 years. I don't have access to his files." "But you do have access to his safe deposit box, the one he left you in his will, the one you've never opened." The man pulled out a tablet, showing me bank records I'd forgotten existed. "Box 247 at First National. Registered in your name since your father's death." My heart sank. I'd completely forgotten about the safe deposit box, had ignored the notices from the bank because I'd wanted nothing to do with my father's legacy. But apparently other people had been paying very close attention to my inheritance. "I don't have the key." "We do." He held up a small brass key, probably stolen from my father's effects during the chaos following his death. "All we need is your signature and physical presence to access the contents. And if I refuse, then your brother dies and we find another way to get what we want." His voice was matter of fact, discussing murder like a minor inconvenience. "Your choice, Miss Moore." I looked around the bridge, seeing nothing but fog and shadows, and the distant lights of Manhattan. Somewhere out there, Ian was waiting for a signal, ready to unleash whatever force was necessary to get me back. But Thomas was also somewhere out there, probably with a gun to his head, waiting for me to make a choice that would determine whether he lived or died. "All right," I said finally. "I'll open the box, but I want to see my brother first. Proof that he's alive." The man nodded and pulled out his phone, showing me a video of Thomas tied to a chair in what looked like an abandoned warehouse. He was bruised and obviously frightened, but alive. "Satisfied?" "For now." "Then let's go for that ride." I walked toward the SUV, each step feeling like a betrayal of Ian's trust and my own survival instincts. But as the vehicle's door opened and I saw the armed men waiting inside, I touched my stomach one final time and made a silent promise to the life growing there. Whatever happened next, whatever prices had to be paid, I would find a way to survive this. For my baby, for Ian, and for the future we might still have together if I was smart enough and strong enough to outmaneuver the people who wanted to use me. The game was far from over, and I was about to learn just how much like my father's daughter I really was.